Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. Kevin, we got markets at session lows here. NASDAQ down over 3%, S&P 500 down 2.4%. So seeing continued weakness here, Kev. But let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Megan.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday is right. Not for the chip space, because they're getting hammered today on the back of, the weaker AMD guidance and the cut to revenue. And Nvidia shares are down nearly 60% so far this year. You know, we know the theme story with Nvidia, right? Maybe it got a little ahead of itself going into last November when it was at all-time highs. But we've seen a pullback in crypto mining. We've seen a pullback in gaming. But the CEO just recently came out and said that, hey, gaming's still strong, but it's not as strong as what the market wanted it to be. What kind of data do you guys have on Nvidia on this dreadful day for the chip space?
Yeah, I think that just to kick off, we'll start with kind of the bad news first, some of the headwinds that Nvidia is facing that you've talked about, just an overall cool down in gaming growth versus the explosive growth that we saw a couple of years ago when everyone was at home and gaming and buying new chips and GPUs so that they could have the best graphics. So, there has been a bit of a cool down there comparatively. And then also there's some geopolitical headwinds. So in essence, our government doesn't want China to be able to have a lot of the technology that Nvidia produces. And so I think that, in essence, though, is almost a testament to just how powerful Nvidia's technology is. It's almost like whenever your mom tells you can't have something, what do? You just want it even more. I think that this speaks to just the power of the chips and the GPUs that Nvidia is bringing to the table. But, to switch to some of the good news, you can see on this chart, these are all of the other macro potential tailwinds that are driving Nvidia. So you can see gaming on the bottom there. And I think this speaks to what Nvidia was saying, that yes, gaming is growing. It's just not growing at the rate maybe that it was previously. But then look at all of these other things. You've got this enormous growth in higher tech vehicles. I think even Nvidia themselves said that the automotive industry is actually becoming the tech industry. And that really resonated with me whenever I was listening to that, because we are definitely seeing that just in terms of consumer demand too. You can see just the amount of chips that are required in vehicles now is way more than previously, especially as this technology gets more sophisticated. And also in that cloud segment. So, Nvidia is powering cloud computing. A large portion of their revenue is now driven by its data center versus things like just gaming. So I think whenever we look at a name like Nvidia, while yes, you could see some, just near-term weakness and maybe some weakening in a macro trend like gaming, there's really a bigger picture at play here for this name. And they're doing a good job of kind of levering, pulling the other levers that are growing, like AI, like automotive, like data center.
Yeah, Megan, for our viewers, you have really good data on Nvidia, and as this market and chips are slowing, they continue to release new technologies and new services and more gaming chips aimed at their long-term growth. Now, this is a high-profile name that you mentioned is involved in just about everything, but gaming is so high-profile that it seems to be weighing them down. Isn't this just a case? These short-term headwinds aren't going to last forever, and when they do, I don't know when it's going to change, and I don't know how strong it will be, but when those winds do change, Nvidia is going to be the leader coming out of this sector, correct? Your data on them, they're still growing, even though their numbers are going to be down, correct?
Yeah, you make a really good point. They are leading in this sector. And this chart that we have up right now, I think, is an indication of this, that perhaps those winds are already changing. And what this is NVIDIA's GeForce brand. And you can see that bar on the far right, those mentions are pacing up by about 75% year over year. So this is a pretty enormous uptick, and this is really happening in the last month. And what's driving this is NVIDIA is releasing its new RTX 40 series of GPUs that gamers love. And so we're seeing a really, really positive response here. This is a whole new kind of the next phase of graphics, and consumers love it. This is the best of breed. Whenever we look at these products versus, say, products that AMD offers, there is a pretty big divergence. And then whenever you look at this company on the big picture, I know it's getting dragged down because of the headlines from AMD today, but you can see in our data that we have AMD underperforming, at least when it comes to consumer demand. Those mentions of consumers purchasing or that demand for AMD products are down by about 18% year over year. On the flip side, look at Nvidia. It's on the top of that chart. So demand for Nvidia products, and I think our data is really, really tied into the demand that consumers will be talking about. So more so that gaming, we see those mentions up by about 25% year over year. So just overall, Nvidia is, it's outperforming these generic gaming trends, which is really good, but it's also outperforming its peers. So, it may not be fair to lump Nvidia in with a name like an AMD because we do see a divergence there in our data.
Megan, and when you look at this, I think a lot of investors, you have to realize this stock is still up 162% from levels 3 years ago. So it's still had a good run, even though we've seen a pullback in here. And you mentioned, the ability for Nvidia to be in multiple different silos as far as revenue generation. A typical gas combustion engine car has over 1,000 chips in it. Electric car has double that at this point. So if you see a slowdown in auto sales like you're seeing in gaming and crypto mining, which we haven't even mentioned that much, is that where these companies are susceptible according to your data, or is this just becoming a more cyclical type of space like some of the other chip names?
I think it could be a cyclical type of space, but I also think that, even the demand for these chips is just so tremendous. I don't think that automakers can even get their hands on enough chips. I think that, that's been a big delay, and especially new car production, as these automakers can't get their hands on the chips. So I think that the demand is definitely there. And if anything, these vehicles and technology is only going to get even more aggressive in terms of the amount of tech that they're going to want from names like Nvidia. And so if Nvidia can cement itself as the best of breed, this is the highest tech, this is the product that you want, which I think it is doing. It's definitely best positioned moving forward, especially versus other names in the space. So we do think that, whenever we look at this chip space right now, there are a lot of negative headlines associated with it, and I think that Nvidia's share price definitely reflects this. But for longer-term investors, this could be a unique opportunity emerging because Nvidia is showing signs of outperformance. We do see indications of even long-term demand from a consumer happiness perspective. So, things might be looking better for Nvidia than the market expects.
Yeah, I keep on hearing that theme start to pop up more and more. Yeah, we're in for a rough patch over the next maybe 4 to 6 months, maybe a year. But longer term, everybody seems to get on board with a lot of these names. And we mentioned AMD got price target cuts across the board. It didn't seem like anybody wanted to cut them from a buy to a hold at that point also. So long-term investors, beware on this one. Now, they don't have earnings anytime soon here, Megan, but do you guys have any score on NVIDIA?
Yeah, we do. So, we calculate that score every week just so we can keep a pulse for how it's trending. And Nvidia's this week would actually be around 36. So for us, that's pretty healthily in the bullish segment. But I will say, definitely some near-term volatility with some headwinds, these macro headwinds that we're not necessarily listening to. We're listening to that consumer demand. But at least on the consumer side of things, demand looks strong and growing for NVIDIA.
All right, great stuff as always. Appreciate the update here on NVIDIA. Megan, have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio, helping us break down more of the chip names with